I'd like to give a short history of Wakefield Lake, and we're going to start out with the first reference I can find to Wakefield Lake being this map from 1886 in the lower left-hand corner. And right next to it in the lower left-hand corner, you'll notice the owner of that land, L.E. Wakefield. That was Lucy Wakefield. Lucy was the daughter of Sarah Wakefield, and some of you may remember her as being a captive during the uprising of 1862. She was captured by the Dakota Indian and spent 6 weeks in captivity. There was a little controversy because she was accused of having married one of the Indians who protected her. She wrote a book called 6 Weeks in a Sioux Teepee to identify or to clarify that no, she was not married to the gentleman. Anyway, Sarah lived in Wakefield starting about 1874 till about 1877. We're not certain if the lake is named for Sarah Wakefield or for Lucy Wakefield, but anyway, the Wakefield family. Shortly after that time, in August of 1866, William Dawson purchased much of the land to the north of the lake, land that's identified on this map as being owned by the Ide family, and also J.W.S. Frost. He bought that land and gave it to the Gladstone Land Company. That was the beginning of the town of Gladstone. That was the beginning of a prosperous era for Gladstone. Here's an ad from 1887, 40 acres for sale along Wakefield Lake. But the closure of the railroad shops starting in 1904 led to a decline in land values around Wakefield Lake. Most noticeable on the east side, you can see the land was owned by a Mr. Bowlin, 80 acres. He actually platted it out. But in 1907, he had to forfeit it, and it became property of the Ramsey County. Ramsey County allowed the cattle from the poor farm to graze on the land. On the extreme upper right, if you look on the horizon, you'll see the Gladstone School, two-story building. A little bit to the left, you'll see the smokestack associated with the railroad shops. You do not see Wakefield Lake here, but many people remember the cows grazing adjacent to the lake. Pork Farm built a tunnel underneath Prosperity Road so the cattle could go from the lake back to the farm without having to cross the highway. This is a picture taken from 2016. The west end of the tunnel is still open. The east end has been closed in by the church. We're now showing 1931. Again, you can see on the right side, the land is owned by Ramsey County, City of St. Paul, and in dotted lines, you can see some of the city lots that were platted out by Mr. Bowlin. The 1930s were noted for being drought years. The lake mostly dried up. We have stories that it was good hunting ground for pheasants in the dry lake bed. We also have a story there was a property dispute from landowners on the west side who claimed the property underneath the lake bed. You'll see their property lines extend to about the middle of the lake, which at that time was dry land. In February 1947, the Parish of Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary purchased 9 1/4 acres of pasture land at Larpenteur and Kennard for their new parish site and began to fill in the low area on the east side of Prosperity. North of the church property, home sites were platted and dubbed the Mary Knoll neighborhood. During the next 10 years, more homes would be constructed to the west and north of the lake, and Wakefield Park became a busy place. Here is a view from Presentation Church looking to the northeast. It was prior to 1952 because the Gladstone School is still visible somewhat in the upper left-hand corner. With all of the people moving into this area, and they were extremely small lots, septic tanks became an issue. In fact, it was the need for sanitary sewers in the Wakefield area that was one of the driving forces to incorporate as a village so they could indeed install a sanitary system. Here's an advertisement from the 1950s that advertises 3-bedroom ramblers. In the 1950s, farming operations were discontinued at the Poor Farm, and the pasture land by Wakefield Lake was no longer used. So Ramsey County began converting it into a true park. In the 1960s, the county began installing swings, a tall slide, teeter-totters, a swimming beach, a warming house, restrooms, lighted ball field was donated by the North Maplewood Lions, and a hockey rink was maintained each year. This photo is from 1962. Swimming lessons were started with free busing from the Maplewood Parks Department to the lake. In the summer of 1967, plans were started to upgrade Larpenteur Avenue and to connect Wakefield Lake to Lake Phelan with an underground pipeline. At that time, also, they would build a storm sewer from the Hillcrest Shopping Center into Wakefield Lake. The pipeline and sewer were completed about 1968. However, this changed the lake by filling in the south end with sediment. 1970s were remembered as the annual 4th of July celebration was held at Wakefield with evening fireworks. Swimming was continued until eventually it had to close because of the poor water quality. In the late 1970s, the creek that fed the lake from the northeast was put underground. This photo is August 2nd, 1986, shows the Gladstone reunion at Wakefield Park. 1990, 1991, somewhere was the end of the annual 4th of July celebration when it was moved to Hazelwood Park. In 1996, Ramsey County conveyed Wakefield and 6 other parks to Maplewood because they really didn't fit in the county model for a regional park. The city budgeted land for improvements including trails and new playground equipment, a fishing pier, and this year, Maplewood and Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District began a project to reduce pollutants entering the lake by constructing a spent lime treatment structure at Frost and Kennard to intercept phosphorus coming from the Hillcrest Shopping Center before it entered the lake. I mentioned briefly about Sarah Wakefield. Her story is included in the book that the Society has published called 60 Stories of Maplewood History, which is available for a nominal price from me. It's also available on the city website under the 60 Stories.
I'll make one correction on the spent lime. So the stuff coming from the Hillcrest from the south is coming into a spent lime basin on the south end of the park. And then just recently this year, we put in, at Frost and Kennard, we put in another spent lime through the watershed district to collect things coming in from the northeast.
Okay.
How big was the lake at its biggest and when it dried up? You know, I mean, can you talk a little bit about how the lake, the size of the lake changed? Not to the exact square foot, but how has it changed? Okay.
Today it's 23 acres. What it was originally, what it was when it dried up, we have no knowledge of that. If you look on the early maps, it really has not changed appreciably because you've got some pretty, at least on the east side, you've got some pretty steep banks.
Yeah.
So in terms of it flooding out into lowland areas, I don't think it's changed much. But it was, it had no natural outlet, correct, until the connection was made to Lake Phelan?
I think I've heard that before.
Yeah,
I couldn't be positive, but that sounds right.
There's hills all the way around it, so I don't know where the water would have gone other than percolate through the soil.
If you back up to that photo of, yeah, that one just amazes me. Okay, so from here, you're on the north end and you're looking east.
Southeast. Mm-hmm.
And so it's so amazing to me because we've got that steep bluff right now and it's wooded, and the savanna's on top of that, but look how open it was at one point in time. Mm-hmm. The oak trees of the savanna have got to be at least 100 years old. We're probably just seeing some of those there, so it's pretty amazing. We use photos like this when we're doing natural resource restoration at the park to figure out what should we be going back to. And here again, that really open landscape.
Yeah, this
is
1950s, and there's one more.
And there you go. That's amazing. What year was this approximately?
I don't have a date on this one.
But it was still during grazing from the poor farm.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Were there ever any winter carnival activities on the lake?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there was.
All right.
I can't remember what the year was, but the mayor of Maplewood put a claim into the winter carnival for several thousands of dollars of damage that were done by the people looking for the medallion. I don't know if there's anything other than the medallion at the winter carnival events. We do have a short video clip, I'm going to guess, from the late 1950s that shows the fire department testing out one of the fire engines in Wakefield Park by spraying water in the air, and all the neighborhood kids running over to get wet, get soaked under the fire hose. But we do have a shortage of photos really around Lakefield Lake. The best I can hope for is that people took a family photo, and then in the background we can see what's happening. Sure. And as I pointed out in some of these photos, if you look closely in the background, you'll start to see old school buildings. This one in particular, can you see the school building about a third of the way from the left? It's the taller building with the steeple.
Yeah.
So I know that was before 1952 when the school was demolished. You know, that tunnel might almost be a historic site too.
When do you think that was probably built?
No
It's
idea.
at least 50 years old, huh? Because it would have been when the poor farm was still using it for the cattle.
Yeah, the poor farm kind of ceased cattle operations in the 1950s, so it's been
Okay.
at least 50 years prior to that. And what I'm trying to figure out is that was either short cows or there's a lot that's buried debris in there.
Right, because when I first saw that, I thought, is it really a cow tunnel, or was it just some kind of tunnel, a storm feature or something?
Someday we'll excavate and see how deep it is. And I'm not certain if I believe the story that it was a cow tunnel, because
So I'm skeptical.
Prosperity Road didn't have that much traffic. And did they really build a tunnel just to get the cows across there?
So that's a reason to do the archaeology on it, to see if there's
Yeah.
anything.
That's another Pete Boulay story I think we need to check with Pete.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Janice has a comment.
So I don't know. I'm just making a guess that it could have been to save the integrity of the bicycle path that went nearby, because the cows kept destroying it with feces.
Could be. Do you have a story for us?
My name is Melissa. The last name is Skavronsky. And yeah, I just moved in, well, it's 3 years now. And I walk around the lake as much as I can, and been really interested in seeing it be improved. And I thought, well, it might be interesting to come tonight and hear a little bit about the history, and maybe some like-minded people would be here that want to see it get better and be nicer for people.
Okay.
And part of our purpose here tonight is to be gathering stories, to develop the history to beyond what Bob has shared with us. We'd really like to delve a little bit more into depth if we can. So we do know of a couple neighbors that have some good stories, so we'll be going after them to drag those stories out of them.
I was wondering if Janice or Bob, if you had any other stories or dialogue around the 4th of July celebrations and the lake?
The one time that I remember being at Wakefield for the fireworks was actually kind of scary, because there was soot falling on me. There was a wind problem that night, and until they got things adjusted, it was a little bit dangerous.
I think they were talking about that, how dangerous it was with the fireworks there. The soot would come over the homes there.
Where is that, actually, that tunnel?
In the woods. So you take the trail as far south as the trail on the east side of the lake, you take it as far south as you can, and then it winds a little bit to the left towards the east, where it goes up to the ball fields, but it's down, tucked in there. It's very weedy, difficult. It doesn't, I mean, this is fall, so someone could make their way down there. It's tougher now when there's full of foliage.
Baseball field.
Yep, right underneath the baseball field.
If you go back, there's some built-in areas, and if you look down, you can see it. It took me a while to find
Yeah,
it.
close to the road, so.
The story that we're challenging, we were told it was a cow tunnel, so that when it was a poor farm on what today is the Ramsey County Nursing Home, the poor farm allowed cows to be down by Wakefield Lake. That was Ramsey County land. And so the story is this was a cow tunnel for the cows to get underneath Prosperity. We're kind of questioning that. It doesn't look really tall, so either it's filled with a lot of debris, or they had really short cows, or it was used for something else.
We will try to pursue a couple of the neighbors that we know have good stories and
Okay.
piece together more of a history.